Let's give it a minute, see if some people tune in. This is going to be my favorite underrated players in MLB The Show, the Fidelity to Reality franchise roster project. There's quite a few guys I came across that I was like pretty infatuated with. I love some of their ratings, so these guys might be maybe a little underrated in terms of their overalls. I think you can use these guys for multiple ways in your franchises. So just give me a second here before we get started. See, okay, drop this in the Discord, see if anybody wants to join up. Okay, we are good. So, doesn't look like anybody's here quite yet, but we'll see if anybody tunes in. Regardless, this will turn into a video for you guys to check out later. All right, so let's go and start off with, so I'm going to break down all the different positions here. I'm going to start first, of course, with starting pitchers. The first guy on this list is Gil, 23-year-old starting pitcher from the New York Yankees. This guy has B potential. Let's see, what is he actually B potential? Is he low 80s, I think? He's actually 81, so this guy might not stand out as like being underrated per se, but he did really well in some short stints last year. So he's got those good strikeout numbers up at 78 Ks per nine. Stamina could be a little bit higher. But what I like about him, and the reason I think that you could probably acquire him in franchise, is the Yankees have a tendency to trade guys like that to acquire like a Joey Gallo or something like that. So I think Gil would be a realistic acquisition if you were trading some type of a higher end star in a rebuild. I would, if I was trading with the Yankees, I think I might go after Luis Gil as one of my top targets just because of some of the makeup. He could be a good, nice part of your middle of your rotation. The next guy I want to talk about is Cal Quantrill. There's actually a few guys here. Plesac, Sival, and Quantrill are probably the three guys that you could target from any of those three from the Guardians. Me personally, I'd probably go after Quantrill. Really limits those walks. This is a guy with a good beat potential. Only 27 years old. You're going to get a few years of service time out of him as well. He pitched really well last year. He used to be part of the San Diego Padres system. I'm not quite sure how he ended up in Cleveland. I don't remember the details of that trade. This guy's got a pretty nice makeup. He's not going to strike out a bunch of guys, but he's going to be a pretty good workhorse for you, eating up a bunch of innings. He would be the guy I would target for the Guardians. The reason why the Guardians would probably trade him is they got some guys coming up down here. Daniel Espino's a pretty top pitching prospect. Gavin Williams is pretty good. And they also got Tristan McKenzie, who's got that build of a future ace. And they also have Shane Bieber at the top. So you could probably find, like I said, they got these three guys here. You could probably look to pluck one of them from the Guardians, and I would personally go after Cal Quantrill. Staying in the AL Central right now, I'm going to go to the Detroit Tigers and Spencer Turnbull. The biggest issue with Spencer Turnbull and the reason why he's so low in terms of overall is his injury problems. You see that durability is down to a 56. He's had trouble pitching more than a couple games in a season. He's currently, I think, dealing with Tommy John surgery or some type of a show. I don't remember what injury, but I think he might be out most of the season. Stanza, thank you very much, man. I appreciate it. So me personally, I like Turnbull. He's got like 80 or 81 potential. This is a guy you got about 3 years of service time out of him. He's only 29 years old. And the Tigers might be looking to move on from him because of those injury issues. They got Tariq Skubal, Casey Mize. They just picked up Erod. So there's their top of your rotation. They got Matt Manning also there, and then a couple of good pitching prospects down there. So I think that Spencer Turnbull is right in the middle there. Somebody who probably won't cost that much that you could get and acquire pretty easily. Sticking in the AL Central again, another guy who's actually kind of a favorite of mine. I picked him up in fantasy baseball last year, and he kind of did really well. I mean, this is a guy who his stamina doesn't leave, it leaves a lot to be desired. But because the stamina is lower, he gets extra boost to those per 9 numbers because of his overall. I think he's a 79 potential, so you can get actually a pretty good makeup with those per 9 numbers, despite that low stamina. This is a guy, if you wanted to, you could turn him into a reliever as well, and he'd be pretty good. I know you see only has 74 strikeouts in 85 innings, but actually the tail end of the last season, he really started to pick it up. So this is another guy who you see won't cost that much at all that I would like to trade for. Okay. The next guy, we're going to go over to the Atlanta Braves. Now, a Braves fan would not trade this guy, but the Braves themselves might actually, and that's Huascar Ninoa? I don't know how to say his first name, actually, but he actually had a pretty good start to last season. They picked up some freak injury and kind of tailed off. This guy's got some pretty good stuff. You see his makeup there. I think he's got 80 or 81 potential, only 23 years old. Lots to play with here, and the Braves, if they're in a competition window here, you see that he's at least, at most, their 5th best starter. So you could definitely find your way to acquiring him early in a franchise, and he'd be a nice staple for the middle of your rotation. Then the final guy is actually a favorite of mine for a while now, is Dinelson Lammon. He's had some trouble staying healthy. He had an arm injury, I think tail end of 2019. I don't remember what year he had it, but this guy's got crazy strikeout numbers. His slider is filthy. I think he's got that 88 break. Got a couple years of service time left, and you see he's the 5th best starting pitcher in this rotation right now. Actually 6th after Darvish was here. So he's actually out of the rotation right now. So this is a guy who you could easily acquire, and actually probably the tops of this list for the starting pitchers. Okay, on to the relief pitchers. We're going to go back to Greg Bird is not on the Yankees. I don't think he was on the Yankees for the opening day, which is what this roster was tailored towards. So that is why Bird would not be on the Yankees. Okay, so for relievers, Anthony Gose is a lower overall, but me personally, I don't mind that lefty relievers are lower overall when I'm using my bullpens, especially when they got those hits per 9 and K per 9 numbers being what Gose has. You see he throws 99 miles an hour and 97 with the two-seamer, so he's got pretty nasty stuff. He's actually a converted outfielder. He used to play for Toronto and Detroit. Toronto back in the day wasn't the greatest hitter. Do you have a pinch runner on him? What's his speed? He's got decent speed too, so you got an emergency pinch runner if you need it too. So Anthony Gose starts off my list of relievers. Then we're going to go over to the Astros, and this is a guy who has been, well, for a while people thought he could be pretty nasty bullpen pitcher. You see those K per 9s completely maxed out. His biggest issue is he can't control anything. He's just going to throw it and it's going to go wherever it goes. Really, I mean, you look at this. I mean, 2019, he had 100 strikeouts and 61 and a third pitched. If you can deal with his spotty control, Josh James can be really nice anchor for the back end of your bullpen. I don't know if I'd trust him in a closer's role because of the control, but a nice setup or middle relief guy there. Okay, switching gears over to the Mariners. Wish we could add managers. The Mets don't have Buck Showalter. Oh, man, if only. Okay, so the Mariners is another guy. You see he's kind of buried a little bit on the closer depth chart. The Mariners have a couple of good closers here. Andres Munoz. This is another guy who throws probably harder than 99 miles an hour, to be honest. Excellent makeup. His biggest issue so far is he's been hurt. He's been dealing with arm problems the last 2 seasons. Really, I think he's got, what's his potential? 82-ish or something? 81. But he's only 23 years old, so you could always get a potential bump for him. This is a guy who's a favorite of mine, to be honest. So I'd be trying to acquire him early in my franchises before he gets up there in terms of his overall as well. Coming up next is another entry from the Atlanta Braves pitching staff. Is A.J. Minter. Now, he's 81 overall. So acquiring him in franchise kind of feels like, well, why would they trade him? Well, to be honest with you, the Braves are stacked in the bullpen, and Will Smith is actually the top lefty in that bullpen, just ahead of A.J. Minter. And they also have Tyler Matzik, who you could also acquire instead. I think that either Matzik or Minter would be good acquisitions for you. It's really just preference. Me, I went for Minter specifically because I thought he'd be a little bit So we definitely added back Bauer. I thought about not putting him in there because I don't know if that administration leave is ever going to end. But I feel like it's better to put him in there and let people do what they want with him. So yeah, that is the Atlanta Braves options there. Moving over to the NL Central, this is going to be actually a team entry because I couldn't pick. I could pick every single one of these guys. The only guy that's probably not available is Giovanni Gallegos. He's at 88 overall. Service time left. Cardinals competing. They're not going to trade him. However, Hicks might be available. He's a 79 overall. You see the makeup there. And then Alex Reyes, who's been dealing with some injuries for a couple years. You see the makeup there as well. And then also Genesis Cabrera. Now, Cabrera might be a little bit harder to acquire because he is a lefty. And lefties that throw 97 miles an hour don't grow on trees. But this guy has got some filth. I like Genesis Cabrera. I just don't know if you'd be able to acquire him very easily. But he makes the list because of how talented I think he is. And then the final guy for the relief pitcher list is going to be Robert Stevenson. This guy is a former top prospect. He was a starting pitching prospect in the Cincinnati Reds organization. Didn't quite work out for them. They converted him to reliever. Some modest returns in Cincinnati, but he took off last year in Colorado. He's got really strong makeup, limits those hits and gets those strikeouts. He even doesn't walk that many guys, which is quite helpful. He gives up a decent amount of home runs, but playing in cores is what it is. And then obviously he's pretty maxed out on his breaks. He's a 93 break. Let's see what pitch has that 93 break. Is his slider at 84 miles an hour. So a little spotty control on that pitch, but really good break on that. So, all right, let me get some water real quick. Okay. So switching over to catcher, we're going to start with the Toronto Blue Jays, and we're going to go to Danny Jansen. And this is simply put because he smashed between both Alejandro Kirk and Gabriel Moreno. Blue Jays don't really have much use for Danny Jansen here in the next year or so. I think he has 79 potential. Maybe not 79, maybe 78. But that's still pretty decent, especially out of a catcher. He's kind of your prototypical catcher in today's day and age. Really, a lot of catchers going for that selling out for power archetype and decent, strong defenders. Now, Jansen's not an elite defender, but he gets the job done, and he's going to grow 4 more overall. He's only 26 years old. He's got 3 years of service time left. You can either decide to focus on training his bat or training his glove. You might end up with a halfway decent catcher. I mean, he had a good rookie season back in 2018. He's kind of fallen off a little bit since. But you see, he still even hits for good power, even last year. I mean, what is that? It's a 250 ISO, so that's a pretty good performance there. Moving on, we're going to go back to the Tigers again and get one of my favorite catchers. He's pretty bad defensively, but if you don't... Catcher ratings for fielding reaction don't really matter in this game. I wish they did because framing stats matter in real life. To figure out what team. Hey, Costanza, if you're trying to figure out which franchise team to use, I'm going to be trying to drop a series this week on kind of analyzing all the teams and how to approach them, and also label some of my favorite rebuild teams. So you might want to check that out. It'll be out. I'm probably dropping that over the course of the week. But anyways, back to Eric Hayes. So I wish that fielding and reaction actually had something to do with how catchers played defensively. It really doesn't. The nice thing about Hayes is he's got that elite arm strength. You see that 99. So he's got good offensive numbers. Maybe he could work on the contact against righties a little bit, but against lefties and those power numbers are pretty solid. So this is another underrated guy. He's smashed between Tucker Barnhart and Jake Rogers. Doesn't really have a spot in the lineup every day right now. And then final guy we're talking about is Jonah Heim. Mitch Garver got acquired, which kind of pushed Heim out of a role. And Heim's a pretty good defensive catcher. Could work on his offense a little bit, but if you're looking for a nice, strong defensive catcher, Jonah Heim could be a good option for you as well. All right, doubling back to the White Sox, we're switching over to first base prospects, but actually Andrew Vaughn is listed as a left fielder in this roster, but he came up through the system as a first base prospect. Might be the destination for him long term. He's just not there right now because of Jose Abreu. A little slow start to his career last year, Power numbers kind of disappeared, which was a little weird because he hit for a ton of power in the minors. Should be able to bounce back. I think he's got mid-B potential. Yeah, 86. So Andrew Vaughn is a nice starting point for this list at first base. Then we're going to move to another guy who's kind of being phased out of position. Doesn't have a role quite. So it's another left fielder in Dominic Smith, who was a first baseman his entire career, but again, can't find playing time due to Pete Alonso at first base. So you could take him and move him back to first base. You see really good batting numbers. Strong contact against lefties, good power against righties. He's not going to give you anything defensively, but this is a nice guy you could probably acquire on the cheap because he doesn't really have a role for the Mets right now. He's only 74 overall. Potential's not super high, but this is a guy you could probably get some work done on your roster in the short period, and short time, and maybe long way as well. And then the final guy, we're going to double back to Marlins here, is Luan Diaz. If you can handle the strikeouts and the lack of a really good average, he's going to give you good offensive, good defensive production at first base, and also got some decent power. He's got some growth left in him, not a ton, but somebody worth taking a look at. So I actually kind of liked how he looked. All right, for the Yankees at second base, we're looking at Gleyber Torres. Now, it's a little bit weird to say, well, how is Gleyber Torres like on this list of underrated? He's really struggled the last 2 years, but you look at his 2019, his 2018. I mean, this guy was a consensus top 5 prospect in all of baseball when he was coming up. His first 2 seasons were crazy. It's just about getting back there. The Yankees are kind of getting a little bit fed up with him not producing. They got some guys behind him, Peraza and Volpe at shortstop, and then you got Cabrera over here. So I think that Gleyber Torres is a realistic addition you can make for your team in franchise mode, because the Yankees might be looking to deal him, and if he can just get back to where he was, what was his potential? 83. So that's a really solid player in this roster. So he'd be a guy that I would be targeting. Okay, moving over to the Tigers. Looking at Willie Castro, he's behind Jonathan Scope right now. So Willie Castro, more of a platoon player because he doesn't hit righties very well. But he'll give you overall good defense, got decent speed. So I'm not going to say too much about him. Second base was a little thin. Gleyber could be dealt with Volpe on the up. Yeah, exactly. And that's what I'm saying. It would be really realistic for the Yankees to trade Gleyber because of the prospects they got coming up behind him that he's blocking. And they could use Torres in a deal, in a package to get another superstar. All right. And then the final guy I want to talk about is Dylan Moore. Now, Moore is actually, I kind of like Moore in real life. His numbers don't reflect it here in terms of contact, but he hits lefties pretty well. He had a bad 2021, but in 2020, he was murdering lefties. I remember that. He was one of my favorite picks in daily fantasy. Every time a lefty came up, I would want to throw him in my lineup. So contact numbers are weak, but overall, pretty strong defender. Doesn't have great arm strength, but he's very versatile defensively. Good power. He's got in the 60s, and then can steal you a base. Only 74 speed, but he's got that 99 steal. So pretty elite on the base pass as well. All right, switching over to third base, we're going to go to one of my favorite players. Actually, 2 of my favorite players on this list are in this category here for third base. It's Christian Arroyo. That's my first one. About to play opening day with KC. Wish me luck. Hey, we'll see if you can get a walk-off hit with Bobby Witt. See if that happens. But Christian Arroyo, a guy, good versatility on the on the dirt, can play all 4 positions. Decent bat. Should have, I think he's 78 potential, so a little bit growth left here, and a decent defender. So all-around good player. Guy I like even more than him is actually Santiago Espinal. Not lacking in the power department a little bit, but his contact numbers are very good. Again, 78 potential, good defense, even adds you a little bit of versatility to be able to play center field. So I prefer Arroyo a little bit to Espinal. I prefer Espinal a little bit to Arroyo. And now that he's blocked by Matt Chapman, should be a pretty easy acquisition. Then the final guy, and going back to the Mets, we're looking at J.D. Davis. He's kind of blocked by Eduardo Escobar. Brett Beatty's coming up behind him. The Mets are kind of stacked with like I don't even know if he really has a spot in the DH area either. He's best suited to play DH because his defense isn't great, but look at those offensive numbers. Biggest concern with him is he's got to stay healthy. His durability is only 73, but he missed good portion of last year, but the last 2 seasons he was able to play. So I like J.D. Davis's bat. Not the greatest defender, but if you can make more do with that, yeah. All right, moving on to shortstop. I actually am going to highlight a second baseman, but he's only listed at second base because, well, there's nowhere for him to play short. You have the number 1 prospect in all of baseball playing shortstop. Behind him, the shortstop on the depth chart is Adalberto Mondesi, who's been playing shortstop there for like 5 years. But Nicky Lopez is probably the best defensive shortstop on that team. He's just playing second base. A Creighton grad, actually, went to my alma mater. Hit his first professional home run in a home game that Kansas City was playing in Omaha, actually. It's kind of a funny story. He played where he played his college ball. Not great power numbers, but his average is pretty high. He hit 300 last year, but you see only that 78 ISO. Doesn't strike out a lot. Nice vision there, but great defense. Really great defense. Nicky Lopez is really, I think, a very solid defense, soft-hitting first baseman, but you can put him at the bottom of your order, I would probably say. Nice guy to get on base before you roll the order over to the top. Okay, let's go to the Twins, same division. Shortstop, former top prospects in the Twins organization and near the top for all of baseball. Hasn't quite had the career that people thought he would. It's hard to believe this guy's only 26 because it feels like he's been in professional baseball for like 10 years. You see the numbers there across the board. They're not great, but there's stuff. It's very balanced across the board. And there's stuff to build. He has 79 potential because he's that former number 1 overall pick, I believe is what he was. So this is a guy you could acquire on the cheap because Royce Lewis is nipping at his heels. Carlos Correa is ahead of him. And then over at second base, Jorge Polanco is already there as well. So he doesn't really have a position right now. And Twins, probably just looking to move on. So this is a guy that I'd look to acquire in my franchises as well. And then the final guy I want to highlight here is Ha-Seong Kim. Again, this is a guy who's a nice helper on the roster for the Padres because Tatis has been getting injured a lot. But C.J. Abrams is about to take over that spot. Actually, C.J. Abrams is taking over that spot right now in real life. Kim is got that B potential. He's 26 years old, but he's got a lot of service time left. So this is a guy I would look to go after if I needed a shortstop. If I was looking at a rebuild, this is a guy I'd acquire early because he's going to grow. He's going to be, I think, a solid shortstop in his career. Somebody that you can use in the short term and build yourself. Maybe you draft yourself a superstar shortstop in the first round of a rebuild. This is the guy to use in the meantime. Him or Nicky Lopez. I probably would lean, well, I guess it's more preference. If you're looking for a better bat, Ha-Seong Kim. If you're looking for better defense, I would go towards Nicky Lopez. All right. Moving over to the left field, Austin Hayes. Now, Hayes may be a little bit difficult to acquire because he's the only really legitimate option at left field for the Orioles, but the Orioles are midst of a rebuild, so they might look to move on from a guy. Austin Hayes has really picked it up with the bat the last couple seasons. You see what he did last year, the nice slash line at 256 and a 461 slugging. So this guy might not be super realistic to acquire because of only the 2 years of the service time, and he's only 26. But it depends how you want to play it in terms of how the Orioles are doing their rebuild. You might have to pay up for him, but I think he'd be worth it because those are solid numbers both offensively and defensively. All right, moving over to the Rangers, we're going to highlight a guy who's not really a left fielder. He's not really anything because he's just atrocious defensively. You see all of those numbers. I wouldn't like those numbers on a single-A player for defense. But fortunately, DH is universal this year and for the future, and you don't need to put him in the field. Just put him at DH. 69 potential, but his batting numbers are rock solid. Doesn't strike out a lot. Good power. Don't think he's super high potential. 74 potential, but with the batting numbers being that high, if he can grow 5 overall, you're going to get upper 60s, lower 70s, even crack into the 80s with that left-handed power there for Willie Calhoun. So this is a nice guy to acquire for your DH slot. And then finally, the guy I want to highlight for left field is going to be Connor Joe. This is a guy who converted first baseman, but now has some pretty good defensive versatility. See how solid some of those defensive numbers are. And across the board, offensively, pretty solid. He's not going to grow anymore because he's kind of stuck at that 70. He has 78 potential. He's 29 years old. This is a nice stopgap player for a rebuild. He's a nice guy to acquire on the cheap because, again, he doesn't really have a spot. He's blocked by Chris Bryant. I don't know. He doesn't have center field as position, so he can't play center field. And then there's really nowhere for him to play. He's got Hilliard and Blackman here as well. So there's really no place for him to play right now. But this is a guy who hits pretty well that I would look at trying to acquire. Maybe you move him back to first base, which he'll drop in overall a little bit, and then you can try to build him back up a little bit, see if you can get a little bit more out of him. Okay, so that finishes off the center field recommendations. Let's go back to the Tigers again. And I'm going to highlight Victor Reyes. Again, not a guy who's going to hit for super high power, but solid defender, decent speed, switch hitter, got 3 years of service time left. Really great contact numbers, 258 and 416 on that slugging last year. Doesn't like to walk, but that's okay. The reason I'm highlighting Victor Reyes is because he's not going to grow a ton here. They already got to kill Badu, who's going to be taking that spot from him eventually in center field. Austin Meadows, the newly acquired, is playing left field. Robbie Grossman's playing right. Riley Green is on the up and up here. So Victor Reyes is going to be probably phased out of that team. So variable. The reason why vision is so low is because based on my testing, vision, in order to get league average vision, which the strikeout rate of league average is about 22.5% is roughly the league average. In order to replicate that in the game, you need a vision of about 42. So that was actually something I found out that was kind of interesting. A vision of 60 will give you like an 18% strikeout rate. Like it's not anywhere near where it should be. So those guys that you're seeing with visions in like the single digits or zeros are because they have very low like scouted ability to make contact, and you can't give them very high because then when they get to the majors, they'll have 50, 60 vision and they won't strike out a lot like they're supposed to. So that's why the visions are so low. But okay, so we talked about Victor Reyes. Next guy I'm going to pivot to is Taylor Trammell in center field for the Seattle Mariners. This is a former top prospect for the Reds. The Mariners acquired him, and he got his major league debut last year. Did not do very well. However, I still believe in his potential. He's only 24. I think he's got 79 potential. And really, for him, he's just being phased out. I mean, the Mariners acquired Winker this offseason. Kalenix still in left field. Kyle Lewis and J-Rod are in center field ahead of him. And then Mitch Haniger is in right. So Trammell just doesn't really have a spot, and you give him an opportunity to play, let him maybe play in the minors for a year, let him grow and get him ready. You could find yourself having a pretty decent center fielder on your hands. A vision of 0, yeah, because his let's go look at what his strikeout rate last year was. His strikeout rate in the majors last year was 42%. Actually, a vision of 0, I think at most will give him a strikeout rate of 34%. So even if he improves in real life to 34%, his vision still would be 0. So, I mean, that's why the vision is so low. That's the only way to replicate striking out this much. No, that's not true. There's definitely room for improvement. I mean, he's got 10 overall left for improvement. At minimum, if you let Taylor Trammell sit in A ball for probably 3 or 4 years, he would grow another 10 overall-ish. He would come out with 10 vision. Now, if you want to focus train the vision by using the hitting coach session training, you'll get more bump on that. So that's how it works. Guys usually don't go from 42% strikeout rates up to like league average. It's just not something that happens. So Trammell's always going to be a strikeout guy in his career, and that's just what you're going to have to deal with if you acquire this guy. Okay, and then the final guy for center field, I'm looking for the Marlins, is Brian De La Cruz. This is a guy who had a pretty decent season last year in his cup of coffee with the Marlins. Not going to give you a ton of power. He'll hit some home runs against lefties, but the righty's not going to be great. Strong defense. You got that really strong arm in center field, 88 and 84 with our strength and accuracy. Decent contact. I mean, right now he's being blocked by Jesus Sanchez, who's a top prospect for the Marlins in center field. Soler, newly acquired, is in left field. And then you got Avisail Garcia in right. Peyton Burdick and J.J. Bleday are top prospects as well, nipping at his heels. So Marlins might be looking to move on from Brian De La Cruz, and you could probably acquire him pretty cheap. Okay. Actually, a guy I'm quite a fan of is Adam Engel. He really kind of took off. The last couple of years, he really started to showcase some of the pop that he has in his bat. The White Sox are a little bit stacked in the outfield right now. A.J. Pollock, newly acquired. Yoelqui Cespedes is, looking to break through in the majors in a year or two. Luis Robertson center, and then they got Eloy and Vaughn out in left. So Engel, being 30 years old, could be up for acquisition. He's got 2 years of service time left. So kind of like what he does against lefties. You're going to struggle a little bit against righties, but use him maybe in a platoon role or give him an everyday role. You'll get good defense and some decent pop. Moving back to the Rockies, we talked about left field. Now let's talk about right field. Sam Hilliard. This is a guy as I was going through. I did his numbers and everything like that, and I was like, wait, this guy's actually pretty good. Why isn't he playing more? He's got insane power against righties. You see that 86 power versus right. Contact number is not great. Vision number is not great. Strikes out a lot. But with that power and that arm strength, that combination, plus he runs pretty well, he's a very intriguing player. Somebody that I might look to acquire as like a short-term stopgap piece for my rebuild franchises. So just my thoughts on him. And then the final guy to highlight here is going to be Mike Yastrzemski. Overall, just about an average defender. Not great, but not bad. Decent contact numbers, but really shines in the power department, specifically against righties. Really, you see what he's done in his career so far with the power. Now, the Giants might not be looking to move Yaz, but I would say that keep an eye on Hilliard raked against my franchise. Time I played the Rockies. Hey, man, I did a franchise with the Rockies last year, and Hilliard was awful. I wish I could have gotten that production Hilliard last year. But yeah, I would monitor the Giants in your franchises, see if they're struggling, because if they are and they become sellers at the deadline, Yaz is a guy who makes sense for them to trade because he's blocking Elliot Ramos right now. They're pretty good in center field as well with prospects in terms of they got Luis Matos coming up. Hunter Bishop's also pretty solid. They run Austin Slater and Steven Duggar in a platoon there, and they got some decent guys out left. So might be a little bit less of a realistic acquisition getting Yaz, but somebody that I'd look into possibly acquiring. So anyways, that is my list of guys that I kind of came across that I really liked as I was doing some of these edits. Some guys that I think that are underrated and would make sense to be realistically acquired in your franchises. So if you guys missed anything during the stream, you want to go back and watch it, I'm going to leave this up on YouTube. Go ahead, watch it on 2x speed so you don't have to listen to me. But thanks for tuning in, y'all, and I'm out.